Hello and welcome to Heritage Auctions. I'm Christina Reese. We are here in Dallas, Texas at our headquarters. We're in our beautiful gallery here, and I'm here with Sarah Jane Blum. She is our Director of Illustration Art here at Heritage, and we are here with some absolutely astonishing artwork by the illustrator and artist Robert Peak. And we have the original artwork that he did for some of the greatest movies of American cinema, and British cinema for that matter. So let's talk about some of these works that we have hanging in our gallery right now. Sarah, Sarah Jane, what do we have here?
So this is one of 5 artworks that Bob Peak created for Excalibur. Excalibur, as we know, was a retelling of Arthurian legend that really tried to bring it back to feeling not like a kid's story, but like a really impassioned human tale. And nowhere can you see the passion more than in this image, which centers on the forbidden love affair between Lancelot and Guinevere. Mm-hmm. The colors are great. The sense of true abandon and true connection really is there. And I think that he won a lot of acclaim for his work for Excalibur. Another one of the pieces from this series ended up winning a Society of Illustrators award, but this one, to my eyes, really just captures the humanity of the tale to the best possible degree.
It's so dynamic, and I love the emerald green that comes in. There's something very emerald about the movie. Mm-hmm. It's a 1981 film, and there's a lot of forest, and there's a lot of Merlin, and it just sort of echoes that whole thing. We also have another piece from Excalibur here, and this was the key art from the movie. Yes. Is that right?
Yes, this is the key art for the one sheet poster that was really used to promote the movie. And what it was trying to do was capture all of the central themes in the movie. So you do see an echo of that previous work that we were looking at with Lancelot and Guinevere, and you do see the green, but here the green is more explicitly used to really talk about kind of that question of nature and how nature interacts with the Camelot society. And you also see, you see the violence of war, and you see the sword, the Lady of the Lake moment with Excalibur itself. You see Merlin, and you see the horses. This is really everything. It's power, it's death, it's nature, it's magic, it's sex, and it's King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table.
It's mythology writ large, yes. Yeah. Absolutely wonderful. So there are 12 pieces in this particular auction, and we have more of them hanging in the gallery. One thing that we talked about a little bit earlier on another video was the key art for Apocalypse Now, which is also in this auction and is the lead of the auction. But what are we looking at here? Because this is also Apocalypse Now from Robert Peak.
Yeah, so this is really fascinating. This is basically the only really fully realized comp for the film when they were still considering using Robert Duvall in all of the advertising campaign. Mm-hmm. And so, you can see, because it's now a triad and you see the relationship between all 3 characters, you have Martin Sheen's head, in profile rather than facing face on like it is in the final key art. And you see, Robert Duvall with his mouth open, because of his famous line, I love the smell of napalm in the morning. Mm-hmm. And I really, I can't imagine the poster having been completed better than the final one was, but I really do like imagining all of the storytelling that could have gone into bringing that tension, that Martin Sheen's character had throughout the course of the film in sort of which version of chaos and violence he was going to go for, the socially sanctioned war one, or the I've gone and run into the jungle and started my own society
the
one.
Heart of Darkness
so
itself,
yes.
Which
is the story of Heart of Darkness. So this to me is just a really fascinating piece and a really important piece of history.
Yeah, and also for people whose favorite scene is the Robert Duvall scene.
Yes,
it's captured here. So.
Yeah.
All right, so we have some other works by Bob Peak here as well. Let's look at this one with Timothy Dalton as James Bond.
I know. So yes, this work is for License to Kill, and it was actually still when it was called License Revoked. And this comes towards the end of Bob Peak's career, when a lot of movie posters were going towards being based in photography from the making of films. And in the end, that was really the direction that the campaign went. So this idea wasn't used, but you get a lot of what Dalton was bringing to the Bond character. It's grittier. You can see that his collar is open, which is basically unheard of in how how James Bond was presented until this point. He was always really like just this perfect icon of, buttoned up sophistication. And here, he's visibly angry. He's, visibly in sort of an emotional state that isn't totally composed. So again, it's one of those things where it's a fascinating direction you could have taken the character and the way you presented the movie.
It's also a really good distillation of just how good Bob Peak was with faces.
Yes.
I mean, what a face to capture, first of all, and this is so intense and so beautiful. It's actually really beautiful, and these are beautiful. And one of the things I wanted to talk about was this next one over. This is Rollerball. This is a film that my dad introduced me to in the mid-70s. It's from 1975. I find it a very sad movie because of what happens to Moon Pie. No spoilers. But so anyway, this is a James Caan film from 75. It's got the best font I've ever seen on a movie. But this is very full of action. It's it's much more gestural. It's a little more abstract. It captures the action.
Yeah, so for the final key art for Rollerball, you can probably imagine it. It has the glove. It has kind of like a more central view of a figure. Whereas this is a watercolor that he created, from observing actually people shooting all of the sporting scenes in Rollerball, and a series of these became a portfolio of fine art prints that were called Great Moments in Rollerball. And so this is a straight watercolor. This is a very different approach to painting than you see in a lot of his work, where it's very mixed media and it is done, over the course of a longer period of time. This was created very fast, which does mean that it mimics, the action of the sport itself. It also means that it more closely mirrors a lot of the work he was doing for Sports Illustrated and for the Olympics over the course of the decade. Because he wasn't just a movie poster illustrator, he was an illustrator who was just quintessential to all of American life.
Right, including sports.
Yeah.
So, and that's captured here in all of the movement. So we've got a poster here and I love the size of these. We talked a little bit about the scale and what we just shot about the big apocalypse Now. Let's talk about the size in his work and how well that services the surfaces of these beautiful works.
Yeah, so this is, again, it is a piece that's so spectacularly beautiful as to almost defy my ability to talk about it. It's one of those things that when I see it, it will shock me every time with how well done it is, with how detailed it is, with how beautiful it is. And this was a comp for Apocalypse Now. So this was part of his process. And in the end, what this would be in the final movie poster is a piece of the background with the, Dulong Bridge and the boat going down the river, deeper and deeper into the jungle. But captured through that kind of acid trip scene. And that's where you get all of these psychedelic colors. But you can see that because of the scale, he was able to, really bring precision to the explosions, and then also a sense of the diffusion that you get when you're looking at water and you're, getting that reflection of what's happening, above ground in the water. And so to my eyes, this is just such a sign of how much he cared. To do a comp this large, this intricate, and this beautiful is just showing that, he was never going for less than 100%.
So this work here it's a lot of people's favorite movie, is for The Hunt for Red October. So we've got Sean Connery, we've got the ocean, we've got something ominous and sinister happening.
The Hunt for Red October comes out in 1990, which again is when we are switching from movie poster campaigns that are based largely in illustration to ones that are based more in photography. And when you picture how the Hunt for Red October actually emerged, in public consciousness, it's entirely red, and it's Sean Connery's face against almost an entirely red background with a lot of text. And what Peak was going for in his concept designs was something that actually, in some ways, to my eyes, evokes what he was doing with Star Trek. It's making the world beneath the water seem as alien and fascinating as kind of exploration into space. So I find that a really interesting choice he made. I also think Sean Connery's eyes, he's working just so well, and this is really towards the end of his career. He's working at such a high level to create this portrait where you can almost see Connery thinking, you know, in something that is really one of the most cerebral thrillers that ever got made.
Mm-hmm. So the majority of this auction is movie posters. However, here we have something else from Robert Peake. What can you tell us about this?
So throughout his career, Robert Peake kept up a practice of art that wasn't for any of his illustration commissions. It was, you know, his own fine art practice. He said that it really, you know, made it possible for him to work as creatively as he did, that he wasn't always, you know, working on somebody else's project, he was working on his. Towards the end of his life, he really started spending more and more time doing fine art. He had a gallery show, and he started really doing a different sort of abstraction. You know, he was always very interested in, you know, using shapes and colors for their own sake and bringing in a more abstract feel than movie poster art had always had. But this, you can actually see he's going for straight abstraction, even though Fred Astaire is very clear. You know, it has Fred Astaire representationally, but you can see a lot of what would you call it, experimentation in terms of just how he's using the frame, how he's trying to talk about 20th century art by bringing in a lot of things that you would associate with abstract modernism.
You see a lot, it's almost like a stained glass effect that he's achieved here, or something like, and you can see kind of vestiges of like Klimt or Diebenkorn or that kind of thing. Is this the latest, the last one in this group? Probably the last one that he produced?
You know, I actually think that I think this is from the mid-'80s, and the last movie poster that he worked on to completion is in this sale. So that I think is the latest, and it's funny that you bring up Klimt because that shows a very deep Klimt influence.
Oh, right, okay. So here we have the movie poster art for The Comfort of Strangers, of Schrader movie, and we were just mentioning Klimt.
I know, and you can really see the influence of Gustav Klimt in this work. But what you can also see that I find fascinating is the influence of Bob Peake from his earlier years. Most of the pieces we've been talking about today, they're this one style that has a lot of light flashes, that has this signature process that involves mixing watercolor and gouache and a little bit of layering to create this one very specific feel and look. And this is very different. It has a lot of heavy line work and a lot of kind of more line-based details that align with what he was starting to do during the beginning of his career. I can see hints of his work West Side Story in this. You can definitely see hints of what he did for Camelot in this, and a lot of other pieces. But I mean, I think the main thing is that you can see his freedom from having been such an important illustrator for so long. He got to do anything, basically. This is an incredibly unusual example for any movie poster, and obviously pushing the boundaries of what could be shown in terms of eroticism, what could be shown in terms of design. None of these characters are really that recognizable to how they would be portrayed in the movie. You know, this is a movie about people in modern day dress, and here you're seeing them as kind of symbolic figures from the early 20th century. I also think there's something great going on with how he depicts Venice as this place that's very isolating and empty, even though you would think of it as a place that's really kind of beautiful and romantic and full of life. Here it's just seen eerie like it is in the movie.
Okay, so here we have Hair, The Dawning of the Age of Aquarius, although this was made in...
This was made, you know, for Hair, which came out in 1979 as a movie, even though the Pap and then Broadway show was much earlier. And what I think is fascinating about this is that Hair, even though, you know, we think about it in terms of the songs, we think about it in terms of the dancing and the counterculture, Hair is a movie about Vietnam. It's a movie about, you know, how people respond to the draft. And so he's working on Hair while he's working on Apocalypse Now in some ways. He's thinking through the Vietnam War in two very different ways.
Oh, I love that.
His significance as an artist is such that, you know, he could be called to reflect the war as it was in American consciousness in such different ways. But I mean, also this is just pure fun. You mentioned Age of Aquarius. I just see, I've got life. I see all of the great songs. I see, all of the great dancing. And again, flashes of the cinematography more than I even see, any particular bit of the storyline. You just get a sense of the film.
Yeah, and the music from the film. So, famously, the stage play was, I think, the first really popular play that had had full frontal. So it was quite the sensation. So of course, a movie had to follow.
Yes.
So here we've got the poster for the movie Missouri Breaks.
So this isn't the final poster, but this is one of many portraits of Brando that Peake did during his creation of the poster. And this is a case where he was, for a time, allowed on set to be sketching live as the actors work. But Brando was known for being pretty difficult on set and also not being off book. So there would be people standing there with cue cards as he was being filmed, and one day he said Bob Peake sketching was really distracting to him, and he actually had him kicked off. So that's one of the stories that I like to think about when I think about this, but I also just think that this is a beautiful work.
It is. It's absolutely stunning, actually. So obviously Bob Peake didn't take it too personally and was able to continue making Brando look absolutely astonishingly beautiful, because he is here.
Yeah, I mean, this is...
What a face.
The eyes. I mean, that's the thing. That when you look at this, when you get really close in, you can see that it's mostly done in browns and blacks, but then you get these little flecks of color in the lips, in the reds, in the headdress, and then just something's in the eyes. I don't know what it is that allows it to get that sense that you're getting another color, but there's something really just sparkling.
That's just it about Bob Peake, is he's great with faces anyway. He's great with faces, but boy, can he do eyes.
Yes.
That's just what, and of course, I've got a friend who's a costume designer in New York, and she says that when she works with actors, that one of the things that's most striking, the thing that really sticks out to her, is they all have incredible eyes. So, and we see that in Bob Peake's work. We've got 12 awesome, beautiful pieces. As you can see, they're larger than life. Thank you, Sarah Jane, for talking to us about Robert Peake's work. Again, our director of illustration art here at Heritage, who's just a fountain of information. And check us out at ha.com.